Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather, 6th day of February 2021. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, hazardous weather graphic. No warnings on there today. Wind chill warnings are gone. Winter storm warning, blizzard warnings are gone. St. Lawrence Island, Bering Strait coast. But there's still a wind chill advisory and a winter weather advisory going for tonight into tomorrow for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. For snow and blowing snow, reducing visibility less than a half mile at times. Winds pretty gusty up there. Kaktovik seeing winds gusting upwards of 45 miles per hour, and Alpine Airstrip, let's see, had wind gust to about 40 miles an hour today. That creating blowing snow, or actually, Point Thompson Airstrip had wind gusts of 35 miles an hour, and Barter Island close to 50 miles an hour for the wind gusts. And both locations had visibilities less than a quarter mile and blowing snow. So that's going to improve, looking for generally half mile or less visibilities at times as winds begin to slowly diminish. Otherwise, wind chill advisory for the southeastern Brooks Range, including Arctic Village, as well as the Kobuk Valley, Ambler area. Yukon Flats, Fort Yukon into Tanana, wind chill advisories out until, I believe, early tomorrow morning, call it early Sunday morning, for those areas for wind chills 45 to 55 degrees below zero. Otherwise, that's it for the watches, warnings, and advisories around the state. Pretty quiet, although today pretty active front brought some heavy rain into the eastern Aleutians there, and along with some gusty winds. Unalaska last 12 hours had 2.25 inches of rain with a peak wind gust of 63 miles per hour. But by contrast, St. George Island, same time frame, had only 1/100 of an inch of precipitation, as did Cold Bay. AKwx Island there just east of Unalaska Island picked about 1/3 of an inch. So it's a pretty localized area that really seemed to hammer Unalaska Island today with the gusty winds. Although Nikolsky did have a wind gust of 55 miles an hour, but not nearly as much rain, and AKwx Island also 55 miles an hour. And winds under that, say 40 to 45 miles an hour for the Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, cirrus pushing northward to the southwest coast today, and not too bad. Areas of clouds, Cook Inlet, but pretty clear, or variably cloudy Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound. And we had clouds over the Tanana Valley today and 40 Mile Country, giving areas of light snow there. In fact, actually, Nenana, Delta Junction, and Fairbanks, the Fairbanks area, the greater Fairbanks area, including Nenana, Fairbanks, and Upper Chena, and Delta Junction, all had 1 to 2 inches of snow today. Some areas may have picked up a little bit more, others less. But the kind of a widespread area of light snow continuing to go on up there today. Then a break as you head north there, clouds over the upper Yukon Valley, then into the snow and blowing snow up on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast with lighter winds back to the west. Kind of brisk winds, 30 to 35 miles an hour out of the northeast for the northern panhandle, areas there into the central panhandle for those normally windier areas. But that's about it. 20 miles an hour, 20 to 25 miles an hour to the northeast for Juneau, but dry conditions, a little bit of moisture down south, but pretty light, especially by comparison to the system out over the Bering Sea there that brought the strong winds to the eastern Aleutians and the heavy precipitation there to Unalaska Island. And windy with rain and snow back towards Chimney-and-Attu at the main low center. That low center pulls back towards Kamchatka Peninsula tonight, and that front will really weaken as it stretches out away from the low center. You can see the gradient still fairly decent, good for possible gale force winds, minimum gales for a period of time there for the Alaska Peninsula, with mixed precipitation trending toward just rain at sea level there for the Alaska Peninsula, but won't be as heavy as what Unalaska Island had. And then mostly cloudy up along the southwest coast. Some clearing over the interior. Areas of light snow persist north of the Alaska Range in the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, maybe as far north or even a little farther north than Eagle with some snow shower activity. And then those disturbances coming down from the Arctic continue snow and blowing snow for the Arctic coast tonight. And still a chance of snow showers or rain showers or a mixture of rain and snow there for the southern southeast coast. Still close enough to that low center and the trough for a threat down there. Otherwise dry to the north and maybe some clearing with lighter winds for Lynn Canal Glacier Bay. And something of a break there, short-lived, coming into the western central Aleutians, but more moisture and another low system will spread some rain and snow and increase in the winds again tomorrow. In fact, gale warnings for Shimmy and Attu in the afternoon with that low center coming up, say 40 knots. And ridging will make for light winds, Adak and Atka to the eastern Aleutians, and that front really washing out as it tries to push eastward there. Periods of light rain for the Alaska Peninsula. Wind's not even a factor anymore with that. And 1,051 millibar high up off the Arctic coast, and kind of a trough wedged in between those two high centers will produce some light snow, but winds will be down considerably from today. And maybe a isolated snow shower for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Otherwise fair for the Panhandle. And for Monday, about the same pattern, except the highs up north are even stronger. Got 1,060 millibar high there north of Point Barrow. And still looking at some periods of light snow, but winds not too bad for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast with some snow shower chances extending south and across the eastern Brooks Range into the upper Yukon Valley. Otherwise pretty dry in the interior, but look at the tightening gradient for the northern Panhandle. Gale warnings back into northern or for northern Panhandle, Lynn Canal Glacier Bay back into the gale warnings, and pretty windy there, say Delta Junction. That looks good for 40 to 50 mile an hour wind gusts with that gradient, and breezy, say Indian Mountain could see 35 miles an hour. Otherwise not too bad out weakening front with some rain into the west central Aleutians. Lows for tonight, minus 20 for the Copper River Basin, and 10 below to 10 above south central Alaska, 15 call it for Homer, single numbers 220s for the Panhandle, still well below zero for the central interior, 25 to 35 below, and then 40 to 45 below northeast interior and the north slope, a little milder along the Arctic coast, staying above freezing for the Pribilofs, but lower 30s for the central and western Aleutians, and then lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula and areas for your lows, and then the highs tomorrow, 30s, mid-30s along and for the southern southeast coast, right around the freeze point there, Klawock and Ketchikan, 35 for Sitka, 22 there for Skagway. Otherwise, teens, 10 to 15 there for south central Alaska, mid-20s toward Kachemak Bay, mid-30s Kodiak Island, and staying below zero north of the Alaska Range, including most of the Seward Peninsula. A little above zero there for McGrath and Nikolai, lower to mid-20s southwest coast, mid-40s for the Alaska Peninsula, 46 at, I believe that's Sand Point. And for the lows, Monday morning, again, back down 25, 30 below Copper River Basin, cold northern Panhandle, teens in the south, and below zero for the Kenai Peninsula, south central Alaska, and 35 to 50 below for the eastern and northern interior and north slope, milder out to the west, but still below zero for St. Lawrence Island, 31 for the Pribilofs, followed by highs below zero Copper River Basin, not too warm over the northern Panhandle, mid-teens, and up in the interior, staying well below zero, 20, 25 below for the Tanana Valley, 30, 35 below for the Brooks Range area. And thanks for joining us.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic tomorrow, marginal VFR, Brooks Range to the Arctic coast, northern Bering Sea on down to the Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians IFR, south side of the Alaska Peninsula, some VFR on the north side there, Bristol Bay, marginal VFR, Togiak Bay over toward Dillingham, and then northeast Bristol Bay got IFR there extending northward into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, IFR Cook Inlet into the Susitna Valley with some lower clouds, possible fog, maybe flurries associated with that, and otherwise in the interior, Copper River Basin, Prince William Sound on down the southeast coast, all VFR, areas of marginal VFR with some areas of IFR as well as areas of VFR for the central interior. And for the afternoon, quite a widespread area of VFR breaking out from Amchitka Island eastward to Unmak Island. There in the Aleutians, southern Bering Sea, but more IFR spreading into Shimian Attu. IFR, Pribilofs right on the edge, that extends east-northeast to the southwest coast, covering Nunivak Island and into Togiak Bay and Dillingham, the IFR, western central Alaska Peninsula. Otherwise, the Aleutian Range, spot of IFR there, otherwise marginal from southeastern Bristol Bay across southern Kodiak Island. And improving a little bit there for Cook Inlet into the valley. Marginal VFR in the afternoon, but the Alaska Range looking pretty good. Some marginal VFR in the central interior, upper Tanana Valley, also the Yukon Flats, and the North Slope and Arctic Coast, and a little bit there off the north coast of the Panhandle. And Monday morning, not too bad. VFR southeast coast, most of interior Alaska with lower stuff up in the Yukon Flats, giving areas IFR there. Marginal VFR, central eastern Arctic coast, western Brooks ranged along mountains possibly. And then a band of IFR with that system, St. Lawrence Island down along the southwest coast, Nunivak Island, the Alaska Peninsula. VFR, Pribilofs, Atka, and the eastern Aleutians, and then a weak band or narrow band of IFR, Kiska and Amchitka out west. And that kind of pushes in toward Adak in the afternoon out there with the VFR behind it and in front of it, in advance of it. And then a more widespread area IFR on Alaska Island, Alaska Peninsula. North along the southwest coast, St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait. Still looking really good interior Alaska, Kodiak Island. And although still marginal VFR, Yukon Flats, and the eastern central Arctic coast, but the Panhandle VFR looks like maybe marginal up to Cape Yakataga. And for the passes, for tomorrow, Sunday, we've got possible marginal VFR in the northern entrance of Anatuvik, and then to the south, through the pass to the south VFR. Same pattern for Adigan. Those conditions will be on the north slope there into the northern entrance, otherwise south entrance VFR. And Lake Clark and Merrill, possible marginal VFR at times on the western entrances, otherwise VFR. And rainy, starting out marginal, becoming VFR, probably before afternoon, late in the morning, surely by evening. And then for windy, marginal VFR through the pass into the north with VFR in the southern entrance on down into the Susitna Valley, or toward the Susitna Valley. You'll actually go back lower again with the lower clouds and fog. Anyway, Isabel, marginal VFR, south side though, southern entrance VFR, and Mintesta VFR. Looking good for Tanita, possible marginal VFR, western entrance there, otherwise VFR. And for Portage, good VFR tomorrow, another great day, and Chilcoot and White, VFR. Looking at the freezing levels, kind of some warmer air nudging northward there. Southerly flow, 6,000 feet, not quite making it the Alaska Peninsula, but 2,000 to 4,000 feet up over the southeast Bering, 4,000 right across St. Paul or St. George Island there. And but the surface, Kodiak Island, hugging the North Gulf Coast, or a little off actually a little south of the North Gulf Coast, and off the coast of the northern Panhandle, then along the outer coastline of Prince of Wales Island. And for icing, possible isolated threats of some light icing there of a mixed variety for the north coast of the Panhandle, about Yakutat, nothing significant though, and icing there over the eastern and northern Bering Sea into the southwest coast. Jet stream, ridging shifting eastward a little bit, but still 95 knot northwest jet across south central Alaska, but the stronger winds now off into Canada, south 95 into the eastern Bering, and 40-45 knot winds there approaching the southwest coast to the eastern Aleutians. And 3,000 feet, stronger winds with the system coming into the western Aleutians, but turbulence-wise, look for moderate chop, western Brooks Range, St. Lawrence Island, Alaska Peninsula, and over the western Aleutians from Amchitka out to Shimianatu.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, or GINA, based at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Well, Dave, it's great to be back. Thanks for inviting us again.
Sure thing. And today we want to talk about identifying burn scars. That would be the burned up area after a wildfire when the flames and the smoke are gone. We can see it if you drive by it on the roadway, of course, but from satellite, we can also identify those places on the land, right?
You know it. You know that expression, ouch, that's going to leave a mark?
Yeah.
After you bang your knee getting out of the car.
Oh yeah.
Well, the ouch, it's going to leave a mark, that also applies to the landscape. Whenever a wildfire ravages through, it's going to leave a mark on the landscape. After a wildfire burns out, this is called a burn scar.
Okay.
And you can ask yourself, well, that's interesting. We can see a burn scar from space. Then the question is, well, why does that matter?
Okay.
Who cares?
Yeah, fire's over.
Right, the fire is over. We don't need to worry about this anymore. It turns out you kind of do, because burn scars are important. There's this old rule of thumb in the weather business that flood follows fire. The action of the fire in killing off the vegetation, in baking, kiln drying the landscape a little bit, can hinder the land's ability to absorb rainfall. So if you have a fire, especially if it's in complex mountainous terrain. This is classic in California. It can happen somewhat in Alaska too. You get a wildfire in steep, hilly, or mountainous terrain, rips off all the vegetation off the landscape. Then 6 months later, there's a big rainstorm, and you get a flash flood in that area. So flood can follow fire. That's why you got to know where the burn scars are. Secondly, a fire needs fuel to maintain itself. So if there's an old burn scar left over from a year or two ago, and then another summer later here in Alaska in the interior, it's a big wildfire season. If there's a fire advancing toward an old burn scar, well, guess what? That old burn scars can be tougher terrain for that new fire to get through because there's not as much fuel in that burn scar. So they almost act like a natural fire break. These are a couple of reasons why you need to know where those burn scars are. Alaska Fire Service has limited resources. They want to put their people and their equipment where it does the most good. They need to know, well, this is an area where there's no burn scar. We better put people here because that fire could really run.
So really important for weather forecasters and fire weather forecasters for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But then how do weather satellites actually detect those burn scars?
Good question.
Thanks.
Well, let's turn the Wayback Machine to the summer of 2015. That was a very active year. We've got a picture here taken up in the White Mountains. This is one of the fires in progress that summer, and if you look real close, you can almost see Frodo throwing the ring into the volcano there. So that's quite the vision. Well, let's look at a visible image. Here we are in Alaska's interior. This is before the fires got out of the cage in early summer of 2015. Let's zoom into the western interior here. Again, this is a weather satellite image of visible light, what the human eye can see. We're into the middle reach of the Yukon Valley there in the western interior, Galena area. And this is just a beautiful visible day. Nothing much going on. It's in early June before the fires really got active. But then in 2015, the fires got loose, especially in that western interior. Here's another image. The same satellite pass as that visible image, but now we're not quite looking at visible light.
Very different.
There's a slight change here. This image incorporates something called the veggie band. 0.86 micron wavelength. The micron's very tiny, but that wavelength responds to vegetation, the chlorophyll. So trees and grasses reflect that part of the electromagnetic spectrum back to the satellite. And so the satellite sees that. When signal comes at that wavelength to the satellite, we know, there's some vegetation growing there. This is great. You can identify coastlines so easily because you go from vegetation to water. Turns out if you have a burn scar, guess what? You burned away the vegetation, so that's going to show up. We're going to do a before, during, and after kind of look here. And so we're looking at before. So in this image, we got a lot of green out there. That's wonderful. Another fun thing about this kind of imagery is you can see down in the Alaska Range in the southeast corner of the image, it's blue. That's glaciers and snow in the mountains. So this is not really what the human eye can see. This is these wavelengths are beyond human vision, but we've made them look certain colors. So the vegetation looks green. Now let's look at that same kind of satellite recipe, but during the fires. This is in July. The fires are loose. You can see the smoke in the middle of the image, the smearing look of the smoke, and then we can see some clouds that are white, icy clouds are blue. So this is in July of 2015. The fires are doing their thing. We're burning up millions of acres. Now let's go to September. The fires are out. The audience has left the theater. You know, the event's over, right? We're done. But guess what? Now look at those brown patches.
Look at that.
All of those places are where the fire has burned away the vegetation. So you can see where the fires were. You can add up these perimeters, get acreage burned and such. And so that's good to know. Now remember, flood follows fire, and these are also natural fire breaks. So you need to know where these guys are. In the course of the 2015 summer season, we went from before with not much burn scar in this area to just a couple months later, we can see so much burn scarring on the landscape. What's interesting too about the satellite and looking at burn scars is you realize that burn scars are the gift that keeps on giving. You can forget that a couple of years ago maybe there was a fire in a certain area, but the satellite won't forget. So in the summertime we get wildfires in Alaska, but guess what? In the visible imagery here, we can see the burn scars just a little bit, but they're not as prominent as in that veggie band. But then you can't see them at all if you cover them up with snow, right?
Exactly.
So here's an image from the middle of the winter time,
wow.
and snow on the ground by this recipe looks blue. Again, these are wavelengths of light that the human eye can't really see. We're getting up into the infrared, near infrared, and the way we've assigned colors is if there's snow on the ground or there's a glacier, it looks blue, kind of intuitive. So this is early April of the following year, 2016.
Okay.
We're just about to get into breakup. We got a lot of snow on the ground, and now it's all going to melt. And as the snow melts, then you get our final image here. Doesn't this look familiar? This looks like a lot of what we saw in September of the previous summer. So this is the spring of the next year. The fires themselves might not have overwintered, they're gone, but the fire scar does. And as the snow melts away, and then you have breakup, and then you have green up, whenever the leaves come out, the grass comes back, except in the burned areas, they're having a tough time because everything got burned off the previous year. So you can see these scars even the next summer, multiple years. It depends on what kind of vegetation there is. You know, some of the tussocky tundra grasses, they'll grow back really quick, but to get a forest to come back, that'll take much longer. So these burn scars, eventually the landscape will fill in the burn scar. It will heal itself, if you want to use that metaphor. But for the next few years, you can still keep track of these on satellite. And again, the reason we want to do that is that the burn scar can facilitate a flood, and it can act like a fire break. So there you are, the veggie
Fascinating
band.
tools. So if you're a weather satellite and you're looking at my bowl of vegetables here, you might be able to pick out which one's the pea, which one's the tomato, and which one's the carrot, and apply that information precisely to whatever it is you're working on there. That is really fascinating stuff, that we have that capability from so high above the planet Earth, and Alaska for that matter.
Yep,
Eric?
eat your veggies.
Yes, definitely. I think I will. I'm hungry. Thanks so much for joining us again, Eric, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you right here next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the coastal water forecasts for the southeast coast there, northwest 15 knots central and north coast, and then turning north at 20 knots there on the extreme south coast along Prince of Wales Island. Inside waters, Stevens Pass or Clarence Strait, northwest at 15, and then small craft advisories for the central and northern inside waters for winds out of the north at 25 knots with 5-foot seas. And for Monday, for the eastern North Gulf Coast there, east winds at 20 knots, north coast of the Panhandle, east winds 30 knots for small craft advisories, and those fall back to about 20 knots there on down toward the, as you head south there toward Port Alexander area, and then along Prince of Wales Island west at 15. Clarence Strait, northwest 15, small craft advisory Stevens Passage, north winds 25 knots. Lynn Canal, gale warnings back with northwest winds at 35 knots and seas at 11 feet. Prince William Sound tomorrow, not too bad wind-wise, north at 15, seas at about 2 feet. Northeast 15, northern Cook Inlet, south of the Forelands, northerly winds 20 knots, northeast 20 knots for Kamishak Bay. And west 15, pretty light for the Barren Islands, and northwest 15 knots for the North Gulf Coast. Outlook for Monday. Prince William Sound, still fairly light winds, 10 to 15 knots out of the northeast with 3-foot seas. 10-knot winds for northern Cook Inlet, 20 knots south of the Forelands, right on into Kamishak Bay, northeast at 20, and northeast winds 15 knots for the Barren Islands and the western North Gulf Coast, 20-knot northeast winds for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Kodiak Island, call it variable, 10 to 15 knots for the winds tomorrow, 3 to 6-foot seas. 20 knots, Sitkinak to Castle Cape from the southeast, and then gale warnings on the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, winds out of the east at 35 knots, and small craft advisories for southeast winds 30 knots on the south side of the peninsula and Bristol Bay, east winds at 30 knots with 5-foot seas. And it'll bring those winds on Bristol Bay down to 25 knots. They're out of the northeast with 4-foot seas, but lighter winds for the Alaska Peninsula, easterlies 15 to 20 knots, 6 to 9-foot seas, 15-knot winds there, Castle Cape to Sitkinak. Even lighter there, Kodiak Island, light east winds at 10 knots with 5-foot seas. Shelikof Strait, we'll throw it up to 20 knots with seas at 5 feet. Western Aleutians tomorrow, gale warnings, south 40 knots, seas 20 feet, and that's going to be west of Kiska, mostly around Shimi and Attu. For Amchitka, southwest 25 knots. Adak and Atka about the same, southwest 20 to 25 knots, 11 to 18-foot seas. Small craft advisories for the eastern Aleutians. In the case of Unmak Island, they'll be out of the west 25 to 30 knots, and for Unalaska Island, south to southwest at 30 knots. Outlook for Monday, Unalaska Island, north winds 20 to 25 knots, 7 to 11-foot seas. Unmak Island, north to northwest at 15. Small craft advisories, Adak and Atka, southeast 25 to 30. Gale warnings, Amchitka, southeast 40, and then Shimi, Attu, and Kiska, east at 30. Got gale warning St. Lawrence Island tomorrow, northeast 40 knots, east 40 knots there for the northern Bering Sea, St. Matthew Island area. Gale warnings for the southwest coast for winds out of the east at 35 knots, and the Pribilofs southwest at 30. Outlook for Monday, Pribilofs really coming down, northwest 15 knots, southeast 30 for St. Matthew Island. Kuskokwim Delta coast northeast at 20, east 25 for the Yukon Delta coast. Pick it up to 30 knots from the east, St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. Eastern Boulevard Sea coast tomorrow. Winds coming down from what you saw today, but still 25 knots there toward demarcation point. Otherwise, central coast and part of the east side there north at 15. Pick it back up to 20 knots from the northeast. For the western Arctic coast, 30 knots there around the Capes, and then back down to 20 knots toward Wales. Brisk wind advisories there, east-northeast winds from Wales all the way up to Point Ley, 25 to 30 knots, but east at 15 for the central coast, northeast 10 on the east side. And for tonight again, winter weather or wind chill warning, wind weather advisory, or wind chill advisory level. Wind chills about 50 below there for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, with gusty winds slowly diminishing and snow and blowing snow continuing, with the winter weather advisory going until midday tomorrow. Areas of light snow in the Tanana Valley continue tonight and along the Alaska Range. Mostly been mountains will stay light. Could pick up another half inch or to an inch, and then rain or snow showers. Chances southern southeast coast, mostly Dixon entrance. Rain and wind pushing into the Alaska Peninsula, starting out snow but trending toward rain. And for the day Sunday, that front continues to weaken and bring some rain into the Alaska Peninsula, possibly the Pribilofs, and flurries on the eastern North Gulf Coast, otherwise cold in the interior through Monday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.